you're like me, then you were probably told early on in your film photography career that Portra 400 is the best film stock, kind of like the home run film stock that never fails, is always good, it's a fastball down the middle, produces great colors, great sharpness, has a good amount of grain, and has that signature Kodak Portra look. And don't get me wrong, I agree with all of that, but recently I discovered shooting with Portra 160, and I think I like it more. Here's why. I've shot dozens of rolls of Portra 400 across all different types of camera bodies from 35mm, point and shoot, full frame, and medium format, and I do like it, don't get me wrong, it again is the flagship film stock that kind of works with all scenarios, whether it's bright light or a bit darker light, you can definitely utilize that 400 film speed quite nicely, but it wasn't really getting there in terms of two things. Number one, contrast, and number two, sharpness. The colors I usually play with anyways in post. In Lightroom, I do edit my film photos just a bit in Lightroom to add in a signature tint and hue to them that is specific to my editing style. But the two things I really couldn't change are the contrast that is baked into the image and the sharpness that actually comes along with the film stock. Now, obviously, Portra 160, because it's a lower ISO or lower film speed stock, it's going to have more sharpness because it has less grain. And the only reason I actually thought of shooting with this film stock to begin with is because, as you might have saw in my last video with my new Canon 1N, I shot the first roll on that camera with Portra 400, of course, and I still thought that the grain was a bit too much for my liking. So I thought, I've got great glass on this camera, I've got a killer camera, why not get a lower film speed, a 160 film speed, and see how much possible sharpness I can get out of my photos with this camera. So that's exactly what I did. I shot with my friend Anna Maria here in Toronto at the beaches with Portra 160, and the shots are fantastic. Like I mentioned before, I do edit my photos very lightly in Lightroom for tint and hue and overall saturation, but the actual contrast and sharpness, that is what I was looking for in the film stock. And honestly, the result blew me away. Every single one of these shots was shot on a Canon EF 85mm f1.8 lens, which is kind of like the baseline 85mm lens that you can buy for a Canon EF mount camera. And again, if you look at these photos, the colors are absolutely fantastic. The sharpness is definitely there, more than it was with the ISO 400, the Portra 400 film stock. And the contrast, I'm really happy with the contrast level and the overall depth you get with these images, more so than in the Portra 400 pictures. Now I will say, I'm actually not too sure if this is a perfect example, because this lens that I picked up from a store in Toronto, I bought the lens, I put it on my camera, and I realized the autofocus didn't even work. So I had to end up manual focusing at 85mm at like f2.8 the entire time, hoping I was getting it tack sharp on the eye, but it was tough. I will admit it was tough, and I still think the images turned out pretty darn good. Now, since then, I have returned that lens and picked up another 85mm f1.8 where the autofocus does work, so hopefully I'll make a follow-up video to this one just as a review to that lens on the Canon 1N. But I gotta be honest with you, I think I'm gonna be shooting with Portra 160 from now on, even if I am indoors on a bright summer day. I prefer the 160. I usually shoot about a full stop underexposed anyways, that's kind of my style, so I don't mind shooting in a indoor setting with natural light, even if it has to be one stop underexposed, if I can utilize that 160 ISO film speed. Portra 400 is obviously still like the GOAT film stock for all intents and purposes, but this Portra 160 is really impressing me. And not to mention, it is more readily available in my opinion. Portra 400 is almost impossible to get still to this day, and a lot of shops have limits on how much you can buy, but Portra 160, always available. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you like it, please give it a thumbs up down below and leave a comment on what content you want to see about my photography, my film photography, digital photography, all that good stuff. But until next time, I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.